Hi, we are looking at Chapter 2, Section 4, Deductive Reasoning. And you should have your highlighter in your hand. And as a reminder, inductive reasoning is the process of making conjectures based upon patterns. And what we're learning about now, what we're going to be using quite often, is deductive reasoning, which is the process of making logical conclusions from given statements or facts. To use deductive reasoning, we have a couple of laws that are going to be important to us. The names are interesting and different, but you don't necessarily have to remember the names, you just have to be able to apply them. So the first is the law of detachment. If the hypothesis of a conditional statement is true, then the conclusion must be true. Meaning, if we have if P, then Q, and I say to you, P is true, P is happening, I know P is a truth, then my conclusion that I can make is that Q is true. Q will happen. All right? The law of syllogism is almost like you're passing the truth along. So if P implies Q, and that's true, and Q implies R is also true, then by the law, we can guarantee P implies R. Okay, and this only strung together two ideas. You could string together 3, 4, 5, as many as you wanted, and notice what's happening is the conclusion of one is becoming the hypothesis of the next. As long as that happens, we'll be able to connect the original hypothesis to the final conclusion. Okay, so here's the law of detachment at work. If it's Tuesday, then you will go shopping, always fun. It is Tuesday. So what conclusion can we make? Well, our hypothesis was true, it's Tuesday. Therefore, by the law of detachment, our conclusion will be true, and we can conclude you will go shopping. For the law of syllogism at work, if you are a cheerleader, then you do gymnastics. If you do gymnastics, then you are flexible. Well, if we know you are a cheerleader, then the first hypothesis is true, which leads to the conclusion being true, which leads to the hypothesis being true, which leads to the conclusion being true. And so, knowing you're a cheerleader leads us to you are flexible. Okay, let's look at the other examples. Okay, as we go through these examples, you again will want to probably stop your video as we go and try them on your own, see what happens. Okay, so for the first one, if the animal is a whale, then the animal lives in the ocean. Daphne sees a beluga whale. Okay, so the animal is a whale. That part is true, therefore, beluga whales live in the ocean. Okay, moving on to the second one. If two angles are vertical, then they are congruent. Angles 3 and 4 are vertical angles. I don't like that sentence. Let's add an angles in here. Put that into your notes. Then they are congruent. Angles 3 and 4 are vertical angles. Okay, so again, my hypothesis is true that the angles are vertical angles, and therefore my conclusion must be true, and I can conclude angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. Do you remember the symbol for congruent? That would be an equal sign with a little tilde over it. Okay, third one. If you make a 95 on the next test, then you will pass the class. If you pass the class, then you do not have to take summer school. Okay, stop the video and think about that one for a second. What new conditional can I make given the statements? Okay, so I can come up with, based upon the statements that we have here, if you make a 95, you will not have to take summer school. Okay, so with that in mind, if you go to example 4, go ahead and stop the video and try example 4, but be careful, it's a little bit sneaky. So if you take a look at this one, it was the law of syllogism again at work, but it was kind of out of order. You'll notice that if you take the second statement and look at the hypothesis and the conclusion, that conclusion becomes the hypothesis on the first sentence, and therefore I can string together this hypothesis with this conclusion and create this new conditional. Okay, let's move on to example 5. If a triangle has an angle with a measure greater than 90 degrees, then the triangle is obtuse. In triangle GHI, angle HGI is 110. So let's see what we come up with. Okay, for number 5, your conclusion should be that triangle GHI is an obtuse triangle. For number 6, if a figure is a square, then the figure is a parallelogram. Then it says, if a figure is a rectangle, then the figure is a parallelogram. Potential is here for law of syllogism. Law of detachment, I don't think is happening. What do you think? Okay, on the last example, no conclusion can be made. Hopefully you came up with that. Again, what happened, we need the conclusion of one sentence to become the hypothesis of the next conditional, but that didn't happen. Our conclusions match up, and that's about it. And that's great, but we don't know anything now except rectangles and squares are parallelograms. All right, we are done with this video and on to chapter 2, section 5. See you in class.